Hello, everyone. Today, I will be presenting our research on the spatial distribution and temporal trend of soft-bottom marine benthic alien species from the Basque Country between 1995 to 2022. The research was conducted in Asti Marine Station in Spain. To start with, we know marine environments, especially the coastal environment, are constantly under the influence of anthropogenic stressors, such as the overexploitation of marine resources, chemical pollution and eutrophication, habitat destruction, climate change, and recently the biological invasions, which is the introduction of organisms from native region to non-native region. And this has been a major challenge in marine environment and also in other biogeographical realm. Then the introduction of invasive alien species has now been recognized as the direct global change because of their impact on the biodiversity loss. And then the introduction of non-indigenous organism involved three stages: the arrival and establishment, the expansion, and the adjustment phase. In the arrival and establishment, we have the lag phase, where the species are being less abundant and less detected. And then after which we have the exposure phase, where the species becomes abundant, visible, and their impact becomes significant. After this, we have the carrying capacity, where the population is rich and they can be affected by other environmental parameters. And then later we have the adjustment phase, where they can be persistent or fluctuated. We know the effective management is usually done or is effective during the lag phase stage. So, but the continuous increase in the impact of the invasive alien species, which I regarded as IAS, is becoming increasing, and then this has led to their global inclusion in the environmental monitoring policies, uh, from the global level to the local level. For instance, the implementation or the enforcement of the International Maritime Organization in 2017 to prevent the transport of marine non-indigenous species by maritime traffic up to the local level, such as the biodiversity strategy of the Basque Country, which aims to protect and improve the state and conservation of the environment, as well as actively manage the natural heritage. However, in the Basque Country, as we know, there is no official monitoring of non-indigenous species, which I would from now on regard as NIS, by the administration or the Basque government. And previous research has tried to increase our understanding of the distribution of these species, but they are limited in terms of time horizon, which is usually around 2010. And as we know, there is additional decades which calls for the need to have long-term monitoring studies of this organism. And in addition, none of this research has looked into the influence of environmental variables and maritime traffic on the distribution pattern of these non-indigenous species. So to cover this research gap, we aim we develop a specific objective to first involve the building of comprehensive catalog of marine non-indigenous, marine alien and cryptogenic species in the Basque Coast and the estuarine, and to evaluate the temporal trend of these species and determine the spatial distribution. And at the end, we aim to determine the influence of environmental variables and maritime traffic on the distribution and abundance of these species. So we hypothesize that over the years in the Basque Country, there has been an increase in dispersal of NIS and cryptogenic species, and then the environmental parameters and maritime activities have influence on the abundance, occurrence, and distribution of non-indigenous species in the Nabio estuary. So to conduct this research, it was done in the Basque Coast, which in the southeast of the Bay of Biscay. And annual monitoring is usually done every winter. And then we have the coastal station that are denoted by the letter L in front of the sampling station. We have the estuaries that are denoted with letter E in front of them. So in total, we have 19 stations in the coastal water and 32 stations in the 14 transitional water bodies. We focus mainly in the Ibaizabal estuary, which we regard as Nabio estuary, and this is denoted in the red box. This is because it is the longest estuary among the estuaries, and also there is presence of the International Port of Bilbao in this region. And then this region or this estuary has also suffered from the impact of pollution from the industry and the household. So our historical data comes from the littoral water quality monitoring and control network of the Basque Water Agency. And the data span between 1995 to 2022. So for the method of sample collection, we collected 3 replicates of sediment and benthic fauna using the benthic graph, after which we determine the physicochemical parameters of the sample, and then we wash the sediment through 1 mm mesh sieve and fix with 4% formalin before we stain it with rose bengal, and after which they were taken to the laboratory where they were sorted for taxonomy identification. So we recognize that one of the challenges working with marine alien species is to determine the native region of this species. And to do this, we perform meta-analysis on 2 public data and 3 recent public literature, and after which we check the list of the species in worms. Then we were able to identify 373 species of soft-bottom marine benthic alien species in the Iberian Peninsula and the Bay of Biscay generally, and these species span across 8 taxa. For our record of benthic species, after cleaning our data, we identified 26,960 records from the 51 stations sampled to be used for downward analysis. And then we'll cross-check this list with the list of the 373 species that was already built. To determine the temporal change, we use the record of non-indigenous species and the number of NIS. And then for the spatial distribution, since our data is not sampled with the same periodicity and not all the stations were sampled at the same year, so we normalize the data by dividing the number of NIS in each sampling point by the number of stations that were sampled, and then we determine the ratio of NIS with the number of native record. And then we focus extensively in the Nabio estuary. Same methodologies were adopted, but in this estuary, we use 3,195 sub-bottom benthic macroinvertebrate records. And then we sourced out environmental data from the quality network, as well as the maritime traffic from the Bilbao Port Authority. For the analysis, we performed community analysis, statistical analysis, and models using R, while QGIS was used for the spatial distribution. So for the results, in the Basque Coast, we identified a total of 937 records of NIS to have inhabited the area between 1995 to 2022, of which out of the 26,960 sub-bottom benthos record that we have. And this species represents 3.45%, 3.45%, which involves mollusca, annelida, and arthropoda. And when we check this data with previous research, we observed to have increased the record of non-indigenous in this region should have increased compared to the previous research. And in terms of the number of non-NIS, we identified 4.2% of macroinvertebrate species out of 1,340 subbottom benthic species. For the temporal trend, we observed a significant increase in the number of non-indigenous records and in terms of the species. And then we observed that as the number of sampling stations increases until 2009, where the number of sampling stations becomes 51, becomes stable. We also observe a stable in the number of non-indigenous records. For the spatial distribution, in the coastal water, we identify the presence of non-indigenous species in all the sampling stations in the coastal water with significant difference among them. However, surprisingly, we identify reference stations despite being far from the coastal water and also short in time span to have the highest mean value of non-indigenous species in this region. And so this might explain the species adaptation to different oceanic conditions, or there is other source of introduction into this water body, which might be as a result of unaided pathways or marine litter or even climate change. As we note, species are expanding their range due to climate change. And for the estuarine waters, we also identify significant difference among the estuarine waters, in which Navio estuarine, Irola estuarine, Oyachon, and Bidazao estuarine, which has the presence of pots in these stations, recorded the highest mean value. And this might suggested that maritime activities as primary pathway of introduction, and these species inhabit in degraded environment. For the Navio estuary, where we focus more, we identify 163 missed records out of the 3,195 records that was used. And then this record represents about 5%, consisting of Annelida, Arthropoda, and Mollusca. And then checking this with previous research, we identify less number of records, and this might be as a result of the difference in the data that was used. In the previous research, 19 stations were sampled, while present research uses 5 stations. And in terms of the number of non-indigenous species, 27 out of the total of 459 benthic species was identified. Why this shows that 4 new species of non-indigenous has been added to the previous research. And then in terms of the temporal trend, we observed a stable temporal trend between 2001 to 2022. Why between 1995 to 2001, little or no record of non-indigenous species was identified, and the increase in this number might be as a result of the expansion of Bilbao ports during that period, and also the implementation of sewerage scheme and the inclusion of the 3 inner stations. And in terms of the special distribution, we identify pseudopolydoral, monocorophium, and the Rhoditapis to be the frequent species in this estuarine, while Grandidella japonica was identified in 2016. Although this species has been observed in the nearby estuarine, but its presence in the Navio estuarine might suggest the recovery nature of the estuarine, as this species has been used as a bioindicator for toxicity. That is, the species is very sensitive to toxicity. So its presence might suggest the recovery nature of the estuarine from pollution. And in terms of the spatial distribution, we observe a downward trend in the percentage of non-indigenous species towards the outer of the estuarine, in which the inner estuarine, which is EN10, recorded the highest percentage of NIS, while the outer station, which is EN30, recorded the lowest value. And in terms of the relationship with the environmental variables, we divide our data into three periods to have the well-spreaded data, and we square root the density data before performing the Bray-Kuti dissimilarity distance. And then we showed our results in the NMDS, and we observed two different groups, which we have the inner estuarine and the outer estuarine. And when we fit our environmental parameters, we observe that the inner station in the second and the third decade are mostly characterized by the temperature, chromium, and zinc, while in the inner stations in the first decade are mostly characterized by the organic matter and the nickel, which might suggest the impact of the pollution in this estuarine that decade. However, the oxygen saturation and salinity seems to be the limiting factors in the inner estuarine, and this might suggest the opportunistic nature of NIS to inhabit in low oxygen level, salinity, and varied contaminant level than the native species. And this gives them the ability to colonize areas that are anthropogenically stressed. For the maritime traffic data, we identified Bilbao ports to be the port of cargo discharge rather than cargo loading. And this translates to the export of non-indigenous species from this estuary. While we look into the region where these cargo activities are mostly conducted, we identify Atlantic Europe region to be the region where these activities are concentrated, in which the Bilbao has the same biogeographic area width than other parts of the world. And this might show that most of our species are coming from the European region are as well being transported to this region. And correlating our record of non-indigenous species with the discharge and loading activities, we observe little to no significant correlation, and this might suggest that maritime activities are not the only source of NIS introduction, and this is only suggesting that ballast water is not the main source of transport of larvae of this species. But when we look at the ship hauling of the adults, we determine the total number of vessels that is being docked in this region, in this estuary, and we observe declining trend in this total number of vessels, while the number and the record of non-indigenous species remain stable over the period. And there is no significant correlation among these variables. And this might show that the ecological status of this Navion estuary is improving. And additionally, we hypothesize that since the enforcement of the ballast water management in 2017, there should be a reduction in the introduction of NIS in this region, and also the level of NIS should also be stable, which is in line with our results. But the only invasive species we identify is the Xenostrobus securis, which was first detected in 2012 in the Navio estuary, and later its presence was determined or was found out in Oyashun, Orumi, and Pedazao. The highest density of this species was also detected in the Nabio estuary and Oyashun estuary. And when we correlate the density of this species with our environmental variables, we identify positive significant correlation with gravel, while negatively correlated with oxygen saturation and salinity. And this might be as a result of the biosis secretion the species produce, which makes them to adapt to any environmental condition without spending much of their energy. So in conclusion, we identify that there is presence of needs with high preference in offshore reference station, probably due to secondary pathways, and in the ports such as the Nabio and Oyashun, the presence of needs may be as a result of the maritime activities. In the Navio estuarine, where there is presence of International Port of Bilbao, although the majority of needs might have entered through maritime traffic, their presence has not increased significantly in recent years. This might suggest the effectiveness of the ballast water since the 2017. And then mostly the abundance of these species are in the inner and the middle part of the estuarine, and this might show the opportunistic nature of the alien species and ability to colonize areas that are subjected to anthropogenic stress. For the Xenostrobus securis, we identified that these species inhabit in the inner part of the estuary where there is low salinity and oxygen concentration, but their occurrence might be more in hard bottom substrate, and their introduction is probably as a result of the ballast water ship hauling of the adults. So for our recommendation, we recommended that developing of specific monitoring system in this region with increase in sampling efforts will lead to effective management of the non-indigenous species in the region. And then for the future work, we aim to assess the cumulative impact of NIS in the Navia estuary using the habitat suitability model and simple index. I would like to extend our appreciation to the URA network for the support of this project and the Bilbao ports for the provision of maritime traffic data, and then to the ASTI where the research was conducted, and to the MER for the opportunity to participate in the Masters in Marine Environment and Resources. And also we would like to appreciate the British Ecological Society for providing the platform to present this research. Thank you for your attention.